Well, that was emphatic. Bayern Munich beating Red Bull Leipzig 6-0 on the opening day of the Bundesliga season. Comfortable, the home team just absolutely decimated RB Leipzig. And Vincent Kompany getting off to a really good start. And I feel like Vincent Kompany's style is purely dependent on the quality of players relative to the rest of the league in terms of how successful it can be. And what I mean by that is, I don't think there's a lot of differences between this Bayern Munich team in comparison to the way he played at Burnley. The only difference is Bayern Munich are much better than the rest of the Bundesliga, whilst Burnley were one of the worst teams in the Premier League. And so in playing that way, they just got battered by players and teams who were much better than them. Whereas Bayern can just force their quality on the game because they've just got a higher level than everyone else. And it's harder for a team playing against them to have to deal with that attacking quality to the point where they have to surrender players in counter-attacking situations. They have to defend well and in numbers. But it's only fair that I give Kompany his flowers and discuss the game tactically. Before I do, if you get to the end of the video and you liked it, please let me know in the form of a like. Only if you feel like I've earned it. It just helps me grow, helps the algorithm notice my content, and it puts it out there into the sphere a lot more. But I'll get onto the analysis. As you can see, Bayern would initially shape up into a 3-3-4 with Joshua Kimmich coming into the right centre-back position, Goretzka as the pivot with Lehmer and Stanisic coming in quite narrow, inverting sort of as fullbacks alongside the midfielder, creating that more central base that Bayern could play through and create more angles. Gnabry and Kane as the front two with Elise and Diaz stretching the pitch. Leipzig not pressing as high, which is very un-Leipzig-like. They would drop into their 4-4-2, Simmons and Openda against the back three, and having Kimmich in this position as well, meaning that they could recycle it along this back three to find Kimmich in more space, where he could turn, play forward, and look to use his passing range to great effect. And he was fantastic in this game, Kimmich controlling the tempo of the play, getting control of the ball, threading passes through the lines, waiting for space to open up, carrying it into positions, first-class display. And just like in that back three, Bayern Munich will look to overload and create numerical advantages all over the pitch. Wide overloads, central overloads, everywhere they could. And to be fair, Leipzig would try and go sort of man for man in that central area on the midfield. Gnabry would look to drop in a little bit deeper than Kane. Kane could drop in as well, but I would say more typically you get maybe Gnabry showing for the ball a little bit more. So Seiveld would drop in on him. You get Diamonde on Lehmer, Schlager on Goretzka, and Bakayoko on Stanisic. But they weren't fixed to those positions by Munich. They were fluid, they were rotational, and they could move and swap positions with other players on the pitch. So let's just say if Tar would look to receive the ball here, then Stanisic could look to pull out here maybe to bring back a Yoko with him, creating an open passing lane that Harry Kane can move into, that Luis Diaz can come into. Or maybe Stanisic is making the inverted run into this position here, bringing back a Yoko with him so that Tar can find that ball into Diaz, who will drop. That inverted run from Stanisic means that Diaz can either find him with a pass or look to move inside with a more space in the centre for him to move into, with the Leipzig defence tracking his movements back. And so the way that the fullbacks and the wingers interacted with each other was very crucial to this. The movements gave the wingers more time on the ball. It was on the right-hand side as well with Elise and Lehmer. And fullback being decoy runners as well was pretty helpful to the entire system of it. And with Bayern Munich's wide players, they're dribblers, they're threats, they've got that little bit of flair about them that they can cause and create mayhem, especially when granted that extra space by the movement of the fullback. And it wouldn't even just be the fullback making the movement to get the winger on the ball. Let's just say if the ball was in this position here, maybe Upamecano was bringing it forward and they tried to go man-to-man, well, they could also look for space in between markers. So let's just say Stanisic moving into this position here, maybe Luis Diaz dropping in a little bit. Well, then that creates a bit of an issue for Bakayoko. What position does he take up? Does he tuck in or get ready to cover out wide? And any space that gets created between him and Schlager, then Upamecano can take the ball out of his feet and find the pass in here. Stanisic can turn and play forward. Diaz can make the run off of him, so can Harry Kane. The full-back in this position has to narrow up as well, so there's space created somewhere because of this. And it's the verticality of Bayern Munich that's most impressive about this entire system. The movements to receive the ball that then create space where other players can take the ball. So let's just say Goretzka makes a bursting run forward here. Well, then this creates space in the pivot. He's maybe dragging a marker with him. The midfield drop a little bit deeper. Kane can drop in to receive the ball here, turn and play forward. Or it can be Gnabry dropping into this position, again turning to then play forward. not just through passing, but again, also getting dribblers in these positions, which Gnabry is, meaning he can take players out of the game himself, running into traffic and coming through it to then get into a really good position where he can play forward, look for the runs of Elise, Goretzka, Kane, or Diaz, and causes issues that way. And to be fair to Leipzig, that constant movement just disrupted them. You'd even get sometimes Lekeba coming into this position here to try and engage in any central overloads, but it was to no avail really. And once those players move forward, whether that's Diaz coming inside with Stanisic moving out wide, or vice versa, because the full-back to wide players would be specifically pretty interchangeable depending on the phase of play at that time. And Elise and Diaz are two wingers that enjoy coming in onto their stronger foots on the inside to face play. So that could happen then with Kane and Gnabry in these positions, then with Goretzka, and as play would move on, Kimmich could push forward and really get onto the edge of that Leipzig box. That created a central overload that Leipzig couldn't really deal with without leaving the wide areas exposed. And it gave license for Bayern Munich to play quick, short passes to players in close proximity, moving off of it as well, finding space. So Gnabry moving the ball here, turning inside, Kane creating movement, which then creates space for Diaz, and so on and so forth. There's just always ways they could create space through those vertical movements. So even Diaz just making this movement here maybe means that then Goretzka receives the ball in this position here in space that's created through that movement. And it's just constant threat after constant threat, wave after wave of run and attack and verticality. And then maybe Leipzig recover in this position here. Goretzka can't progress forward. Well, then again, Gnabry drops back, receives the ball safely, and then Bayern can live to fight another day and just recycle and sustain that attacking pressure. The only issue is that when Bayern surrendered the ball, they were left open to the counter attack. Passes out to the wide players. Openda maybe making movement, stretching the centre back duo. Simmons in this area, maybe creating space for Bakayoko to attack space. They commit so many men forward, it leaves them vulnerable. This is a pretty transitional team at the minute for Leipzig, with losing Sesko. Xavi Simmons feels like he's on his way out. There's new players coming in, Bakayoko, Diamonde. And so it feels like they're still in the process of finding what this new team is. A fairly new manager as well just means there's still a little bit of an adjustment period with this Leipzig team, and they haven't quite hit the balance yet. But Bayern Munich transitioned well, and they also defended decently well. I'll go over that now. Bayern pressed completely man to man, aggressively. Leipzig would try and build up in this sort of 4-3-3, as you can tell, with Seiveld initially starting off as a pivot, but would quickly make vertical movements forward, which then created room for Xavi Simmons to drop deep and receive the ball from the goalkeeper. Xavi Simmons having the technical quality to try and turn and create something for Leipzig, which Seiveld didn't have. And obviously, Elise and Kimmich marking their respective players would then have to adjust depending on where play was heading at that point. So Kimmich could still follow Simmons into this position with Elise dropping, or if they felt comfortable enough and they communicated well enough, they could hand over the markers and retain their same shape. And they got used to it, and it got better after a little while because of the repetition involved with this from Leipzig. So it would force them long a lot, but to be fair, Bayern Munich, they had a pretty strong back three there with Lehmer pushing up onto Rahm, which meant that Upamecano, Tar, and Stanisic as the back three against the front three for Leipzig. And they physically won their duels very well. Upamecano, I thought, was brilliant in this game and shows the qualities that he offers in a team that presses high and operate on the halfway line. As much as he's got an error in him, I felt like he approached this game very well. And again, there's always an issue when you're a high pressing team that it just takes one player losing their marker, which happens a lot. So let's just say if Xavi Simmons can link up with Lekeba here, he can play off of him and then receive the ball in space. Bayern Munich have got to be ready to react and get players who are in close enough proximity they can quickly move and mean one of two things. One, they can at least cut the passing lane off to their original marker, or at least hold the player at bay to allow the player that's been caught off of his marker to get back in cover. This doesn't always work out and you can lose space, but to be fair, as I've just said, Bayern Munich transition defensively really well, so they have great levels of fitness and athleticism. They can recover and quickly get back onto the man and quickly try and reduce space as much as possible. Leipzig would look to attack quick. Bakayoko would come in quite narrow just to allow more room for Baku on the far side to overlap and maybe run off of Diaz. Didn't happen as much because of the way Bayern Munich enacted their press. And an offside goal, which was marginally off, meant that Leipzig came out of the game with nothing, despite the risk that Bayern Munich played with. They didn't get exploited. They did their press well enough, and it Leipzig just lacked a little bit of something, but Munich played with risk and they got their reward, as they always do under Kompany. Against much better teams, this can exploit you and you can get game planned against hard. Against Leipzig, against a transitional Leipzig, you can put the sword to them, and against certain teams, you will just absolutely batter them playing this way because you will just constantly sustain pressure. And to be fair to Bayern in the second half, they did drop off a little bit more than they usually do and took on some pressure on their own and killed Leipzig on the counter attack. Kane getting a hat trick and thoroughly deserved. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Let us know down in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.